I want to talk a little bit about different parts of the window trim assembly. We already talked about casings. We already talked about jamb extensions. I want to talk about the window stool, okay? I always do this and I always catch myself, but everybody always calls this the window sill. That's fine. Technically, it's called the window stool. The window sill is the exterior part, usually sloped to shed water away. But this is actually a piece of molding, the window stool. That's going to cover the rough sill. The apron is a piece of molding that goes underneath the stool. And there's going to be another joint that's going to get concealed with that apron, and that's where the sheetrock is cut on the rough sill. Okay, so sometimes this gets omitted and that joint just kind of gets caulked, but this gives it a much more finished look. And then typically, depending on what kind of style you're going for, but usually the head casing's thicker than the side casings and the apron is narrower. Okay, so kind of a classic look would be 1x5 casing on the sides, 1x6 head casing, and usually like a 1x4 or a 1x3 apron. Okay, and then we'll talk about some of the other dimensions on this stool. All right, so let's pretend we're going into a house and we're going to start trimming everything out. The first thing we would want to do is hang the doors. I like to case the sides of the door first. I like to get my combination square and I like to mark whatever reveal I want on the door jamb. And I'm going to cut my side casings, measuring from the floor to the mark I made on the jamb. I'm just going to put one nail in those side casings, somewhere up here. Okay, same thing, somewhere up here. The top of this casing is nailed to a corresponding reveal mark that I made on the jamb. I usually like to have a 1/4 inch reveal all the way around here. Okay, and remember, we got two reveals here. One reveal is the door, the door to the jamb. Okay, we're seeing air through that point. Okay, then we're going to have another reveal where we're seeing a 1/4 inch of jamb all the way around this door, and then the casing is nailed to the wall and to the jamb. Okay. After I've got the side casings cut and one nail tacked in each one of these, I'm going to cut the head casing. Traditionally, you overlap the head casing half the thickness of the trim on each side. Okay, so if our trim is 3/4 of an inch thick, the head casing is going to overlap 3/8 on each side. The reason we do that isn't because, well, some people really like the way it looks, but when we do this, we're trying to avoid flush joints, okay? If we were trying to make this head casing flush with the side casing, that would be more difficult to do, okay? Let's just, for example here, let's say that head casing on one side is overhanging 5/16, and on the other side, it's overhanging 7/16. Or maybe that you might notice that. Let's say it's 5/16 on one side and it's 3/8 on the other side. No one will notice that. Okay. Let's say you try and make the head casing flush to the side casing, and it's a 1/16 of an inch short. People are going to spot that a mile away. Or if it's a 1/16 inch long, people are going to spot that a mile away. Same thing for a 32nd or 64th. If it's not exactly flush, people will notice it. Okay, so when we build that overhang in there to let us make mistakes, it builds in sloppiness, but then it kind of looks nice also. Okay, all right. The window stool, this is an important thing, and this doesn't always get installed. Sometimes people will just do like a picture frame detail around the window because that's easier. Side casing, head casing, and bottom casing. The window stool is kind of nice. It gives you a little place to set stuff. You could do a couple things here. You could make your own window stool stock. You could cut it out of whatever trim material you're using. But generally you want the window stool to be a little bit thicker. If we're using 1x casing, I'd probably use a 5/4 window stool. We get this stuff at Almquist that I think it's only like 3/4, 13/16, something like that, but it still looks fine, and it has a nice beaded edge run around it. Okay, so there's a couple things with this stool that you need to do to get it to look right. Okay, first thing you need to do, the window stool needs to extend past the side casing by 1 inch. Okay, so the order, I mean, I have this as like the third thing on here. Okay, you could do this whenever you want, as long as you're thinking about these steps. Okay, in order to cut the window stool to length, you need to know where the window casing is going to land so that it can extend past the window casing 1 inch. Maybe you don't know where the window casing is going to go if you don't have your jamb extensions in. Okay, so just think about that. Okay, but suffice it to say, for a finished look, we want the window stool to extend past the side casing 1 inch. Okay, so if I hooked the side casing and measured over to the outside edge of the other side casing, I would add 2 inches to the length of my window stool. Okay, this picture is awesome. Okay, marked on the wall is the side casing. Marked on the wall is the length of the window stool. They've taken that window stool material, butted it up against the wall, and marked where this notch is going to be. Okay, because one edge of the window stool is going to go tight to the window frame. Okay, on each side of the window stool, it's going to get cut away so that it sits flat against the wall. Okay, a nice trick is to set your compass to whatever the distance is from the jamb extension to the window frame. Set your compass against the wall and trace it along the window stool. And that compass is going to perfectly follow the contour of that wall and transfer the contour onto that window stool material. And then you can get your jigsaw and cut that out. Okay. If you want to take this to the next level, you're going to cut a 45-degree miter on that window stool. I guess it's going to be from the casing. You're going to cut a 45-degree miter on that window stool. Actually, it's just going to be a 45-degree. It's not necessarily going to go there. It's not necessarily going to go there. Sorry about that. You're going to cut a 45-degree miter on that window stool. You're going to cut a corresponding 45-degree miter out of another piece of stock, and you're going to super glue and then maybe shoot some tiny little nails into it. And what that's called is creating a return. Again, we're always trying to conceal the end grain. So if you just got a piece of window stool and cut it to length and nailed it on, it's going to look kind of weird. It's going to take paint differently than everything else. If you have a profile routed onto a face of the window stool, that's not going to transfer over to the side when you cut that off. But if you cut a 45-degree miter on that, glue a return onto that, it'll look like it's just one continuous piece. Okay? All right. Jamb extensions, and the reason I had the apron before the jamb extensions is because in theory you want the jamb extensions to sit on top of the window stool. Okay? If you tried to, and the reason is because then that cut can get a little sloppy. Where'd my mouse go? That cut can get a little sloppy here where it meets the trimmer, but it'll be concealed by that jamb extension. Okay, so like I said before, maybe we're building this jamb extension as one piece, slipping it in, shimming it out, nailing it in, but the important thing is that we want the jamb extension where it meets the window frame to be parallel all the way around. Okay, and then this window stool, when this goes in, that's going to be a little bit different animal. Maybe you're not using a window stool, but if you are, you could shim that window stool up so that you have the same reveal on the bottom. Okay. All right. When we do the window casings, I would wait on the window casings until you get the jamb extensions in, because the window casings are going to nail to the jamb extensions, just like we talked about with the door. We're going to make some kind of reveal on that jamb and then nail the casing to the jamb extensions. The reason we want to have a reveal, it's the same thing why I said we'd usually have the side casing, or excuse me, the head casing overhang the side casing. If we try and have our casing flush with our jamb extension, we're going to have a lot of headaches. Okay, if that jamb extension bows in or bows out anywhere along that rough opening, if we try and put a straight piece of wood against that, we're going to see that those two surfaces aren't flush. Okay, we have to work really hard if we want to not have a reveal where that casing meets the jamb extension. If we build in a 1/4 of an inch reveal, it could vary a little bit here and there, and no one would ever see it. Okay. All right. The apron, okay, that's that little piece of trim that goes underneath the window stool. We talked about this. The length of that apron is going to be the same as the outside of the casing to the outside of the casing. Okay. Baseboard is usually going to be the last thing that we put on, and the reason is because we need that to butt into the door casing. Okay, I'm not saying 100% every single time you have to do the baseboards last. You can start doing baseboard where you can, but you're gonna need to get the doors cased out before you put the piece of baseboard that's gonna butt into the doors. Okay. All right. After we've completed all of our installation, we're going to go around and get ready to prep all this stuff for paint. Okay, 2 different things we're going to use: caulking and spackling. Anywhere trim meets trim, if we have casing meeting jamb extensions, casing meeting door jambs, we're going to caulk those gaps. Where we have baseboard meeting the wall, we're going to caulk that gap, and we're going to wipe it down with a damp rag. Okay, especially where we've have that baseboard to wall junction that we've caulked. In most homes, there's going to be some sort of texture on the wall. And if you come back and put some heavy bead of caulking on there and tool that out, there's going to be a smooth spot all the way around the perimeter of the baseboard. Okay? That being said, you have to be gentle with the wet rag. Okay? One year, somebody took it to heart when I said, wipe down that wall with a damp rag, and they scrubbed all the texture off the wall. So we just had a 1-inch smooth spot all the way around the room. Okay, and it was disconcerting. Okay, nail holes we're going to fill with spackle. Never caulking. Caulking does nothing. We're going to get some sort of spackling. We're going to get our putty knife, and we're going to apply spackling to the nail hole. Sometimes we're having to set some nails here and there. Oftentimes we're having to come back and spackle again, but at any rate, we're going to wait for it to dry, we're going to sand it, and then we're going to prime them. It's very important that we prime the spackling, because if we're usually going to use a semi-gloss, like a higher gloss paint, and if that spackling isn't primed, it'll flash. And when we say flash, it means you'll see every little nail hole. Even though it's been filled, it's going to absorb the paint differently than whatever material we use for the baseboard.